I'm also joined by Mr. Vineet Narain, who's a journalist and anti-corruption activist, and KV Dhananjay, who is an advocate. Mr. KV Dhananjay and Mr. Vineet Narain, thank you for making time and speaking to Mirror Now. I would like to ask Mr. Vineet Narain first. You have been tracking corruption very closely. You've been a journalist yourself. When stories like these come to light, where all right, I'm afraid there are some technical issues, so I would like to go to KV Dhananjay first, and in the meantime, we can try and fix that link Mr. Vineet Narain. Mr. Dhananjay, you know, when such stories come to light, do you think there is a difference when an ordinary person is accused and when the high and mighty, such as ministers, are accused in very sensitive cases? The way the police handles these investigations, the way the probe proceeds, there is a huge difference between how an ordinary person would be treated versus a minister?
Honestly, the police force is highly politicized. There's no doubt about it. And there's also substantial corruption within the police force. And, you know, in the matter of appointment of police force, we've seen courts intervene very often. And of course, the courts have advocated reforms, but so many of these reforms have failed to curb corruption within the police force. So it's fair to say that within the police force, there is substantial politicization, and then they are open to political influence. In a case like this, where a sitting minister is accused of having, abetted suicide, the first order of business for the police would have been to file an FIR, provided they have somebody who will actually provide some information. Now, please remember, the way the criminal law works is that if there is information before the police, then the police will have to draw an FIR. Now, that information may be credible, may not be credible, and the credibility is not for the police to decide. So in the circumstances of this case, it's fair to say that the police ought to have filed an FIR. And the fact that they have not done so far, it appears to me like they have not filed any FIR and named Mr. Eshwarappa, because I believe there is substantial material at this point of time to implicate him. So with the chief minister assuring people that there will be a probe and all that nonsense makes no sense whatsoever, because the police don't conduct any probe, they conduct an investigation. And the investigation will have to be conducted under the Criminal Procedure Code. For that requires them to register an FIR. I don't think they have done that so far. So your question was, in this country, is there really a difference between how the accused politicians are dealt with vis-a-vis accused ordinary persons are? There's a 100% difference, because the police is obviously going to listen to somebody, and the police is not going to inconvenience their political masters. So, so in this context, you always tend to see what the political parties, the opposition parties are doing. But, the problem with corruption is that, if an opposition political party were to raise this, the question that we also must ask the opposition political party is, what did they do during their tenure in power? In Karnataka, there used to be the Lokayukta police. And that police was in fact disbanded by the previous Congress government. Mr. Siddaramaiah disbanded it. And that issue is now 4 or 5 years old, and the Honorable High Court of Karnataka has not had the time to deal with it. So when we talk about corruption, we have to look at it from a very comprehensive perspective, because corruption is not about any one political party. Corruption is deep-rooted in our system. It's deep-rooted in the police force. It's deep-rooted, in the political establishment. It is in that context that we've got to look at it. And, I think the Congress party as the opposition will only be happy or pleased to see Mr. Eshwarappa step down. But that's not really the solution that the law would recommend. The solution that the law would recommend here is, why does somebody take out his own life and blame a minister for having goaded him to pay him off 40% commission? Because whatever work there is awarded by the government. If a contractor is asked to pay 40% commission in return for release of funds or in return for clearing of bills, you can only imagine that the plight of a contractor. Now, we are not really commenting on the merit of this case, but we're only looking at appearances. And I think we are all entitled to talk about appearances, because at the end of the day, rule of law means that sometimes you have to deal with appearances only. It's entirely possible Mr. Eshwarappa is innocent, but the point at which anybody could in fact give him that clean chit is after the police has registered an FIR and has investigated him. Now, when the police don't register an FIR, that's when you got to really suspect if there is a lot of truth to these allegations.
Yes.
Because if,
Okay.
that's the way
That's a very important point you made, sir, that the police has yet to file an FIR, and at the moment these are just allegations, and the merits of the case will emerge in the latest in going ahead. But at the moment, the action that has been taken by the police, the kind of narrative that exists, it's important to talk about it, which is why I'm going to ask Mr. Vineet Narain to weigh in on this. Mr. Narain, you have been tracking these corruption stories very closely. You have been a corruption activist yourself. When you see stories like these emerging from a state of Karnataka, where this is not the first time when we are talking about the 40% commission menace, a life has been lost because of that. The probe is still underway. But the way this system works, the way this entire system functions, that you have to, that nobody has been heard, there has been no action. Ministers and the government has consistently denied these allegations, but there has to be a probe. What is your view on this, the way everything has been handled so far?
Archana, I have become senile. I started this anti-corruption crusade in 1986 with my TV show, Doordarshan investigative TV show. Until today, I have yet to see a situation where investigating agencies are dealing with matters of corruption with full transparency and fairness. That's my first observation. The second is that this percentage, 40% of the commission is a done thing throughout the country. It may vary from 25 to 40, but the modus operandi is very simple, that despite online tendering, despite online submission of tenders, despite online award of tenders and all, the fact is that there are certain set of contractors who find out the link to the concerned minister. They go to the minister and in advance, give cash of that percentage which is demanded from them. And after that, the whole tendering process is humbug. They are given the contract. Imagine if 40% has been given by the contractor to the concerned minister in any state, how much will then be given to the district authorities, to the engineering wing, and to other, local politicians? Then contractor also has to save at least 10-15% as his profit. So as Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi had said long back, and successive prime ministers have said this again and again, that not more than 10-15% of the total allotment of fund is actually used for developmental work. So as it is, exchequers, 70% money goes into salaries and maintaining the establishment, and out of that 30%, this is how it is used. So actually, the developmental fund is so minimum that this rich country, Sujalam Suplam Shasya Shamlam country, which is full of minerals and hardworking people and natural resources and sunlight and entrepreneurship, is still suffering after 75 years of independence. I have been associated as a student with the National Police Commission 1978 when Rustam, GNS Saxena and so many people were members at Loknaik Bhavan in Khan Market, Delhi. I used to go there out of curiosity and used to interact with them. And that was the time I realized that how much rot is there in Indian police system.
Right.
And that police commission's report since then is collecting dust. There have been several subsequent police reform committee reports and all, but nothing has been executed. Police force is misused by the ruling party, irrespective of who's ruling at the central state, and they are used as pawns in the hands of ruling party. They are used to blackmail and harass the political opponents. But when the same opposition party comes to power, they do the same thing. It's an endless game which goes
Absolutely.
on and on. Yeah.
It's an endless game, as you rightly said, that it doesn't matter which party is in power, corruption exists, and this is something that that we as a country, that our system has failed to address. Thank you so much, Mr. KV Dhananjay and Vineet Narain, for your valuable time and insights on this story that we are closely tracking on Mirror Now.